thank you everyone for joining us. My name is Adrienne Nearday, and I have the pleasure of serving as the Associate Director of the North Carolina African American Heritage Commission. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the 9th and final webinar in our 9-part series, Growing Our Griots, Strengthening North Carolina's Black Heritage Keepers. During this series, we explored how our state's Black heritage institutions can execute innovative and sustainable work with the insights of a diversity of cultural workers from across the state and country, like today's guests, who I will introduce shortly. The African American Heritage Commission received the American Rescue Plan Humanities Project Support Grant from the North Carolina Humanities Council to execute this series. You can learn more about the North Carolina Humanities Council online at nchumanities.org. Funding for the American Rescue Plan has been provided by the National Endowment for Humanities as part of their American Rescue Plan Act. Today, feel free to drop any questions that you might have in the chat throughout the presentation, and we'll do our best to incorporate them as part of the conversation. I also want to take just a moment to thank the members of my team who are able to make today possible. Our director, Angela Thorpe, Miranda Clinton, who is a graduate student in North Carolina State University's Public History program. Miranda's work is being funded through this grant. And a special hello to John Cooper, E. Pearson, Catalina Lopez, and Winifred Quire, graduate student and undergraduate students at UNCG, Wake Forest University, Belmont Abbey College, and Winston-Salem State University, respectively, who are joining us due to this funding as well. Just as a notification, we also are recording today's session, which will be sent out to folks following the presentation, as well as linked. Coming up, we will have a resource page that we are creating as part of this series where folks can take a look at it as well. With that all being said, I am thrilled to welcome our presenters who are joining us in conversation today. We have Sara Blanchett, who is the Curator of Education for the High Point Museum. Bernard George, who is a historian and preservationist based in Newberry, North Carolina. Duana Little, who is the Executive Director of the Waimai Cultural Center in Asheville, North Carolina. Good afternoon and welcome.
Good afternoon.
Hello.
Fantastic. Well, I have kind of a series of questions for you today. Some of them are meant for you all as a group, and some of them I have written out for you each individually, but I also think that we can kind of take some space and see where our conversation takes us. Feel free throughout the presentation too, if you have a thought. You know, Sara, if you want to ask Bernard something, you hear him bring something up, feel free to shoot a question his way as well. I want to make sure that this stays comfortable and that we're just kind of making sure that people's questions are addressed. So just to kick us off, as Black cultural workers, these last couple of years, they've had some challenges and we've had a host of different experiences. How are you all doing? How are things going for you?
I'm tired. You know, COVID has kind of shaken up the entire world, and we've all had to kind of pivot how we present our history or how we present our world. So it's been exhausting trying to adapt so quickly. I mean, it went from, oh, this is going to pass in the next few weeks to this is going to stay for, you know, the entirety of our lives. So at the beginning, just quickly trying to adjust and canceling or rescheduling programs and then having to rethink programs and their presentation in a completely different way and having to rely more on the digital and virtual world than anything. That in particular has been really exhausting. And then coming back from that a little, okay, how do we have hybrid? And then how do we not have hybrid anymore because we're back to normal, or are we back to normal? It's just been really exhausting, but it also has been really challenging in a positive way and has kind of forced me to not be so stagnant with my creativity and how I connect to audiences.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Sara.
Well, it's been challenging for me also, but it's been fulfilling because there has been a vacuum in programming, and I've been able to fit in that vacuum somewhat from time to time. I am retired and I'm a private consultant, so I do get busy in that area. but I'm on the board of Tri-Palace Commissioners, and working through them and through the North Carolina African American Color Troops, which I was very fortunate to help form one of the very first groups here in the Carolinas. And we've been very busy despite COVID. And sometimes it's a little scary because you wonder exactly where you are in that COVID spectrum. You know, are we in mass or are we not? And secondly, are we in danger or are we not? You know, that's something we have to consider, our own personal circumstance. But all in all, it's been very fulfilling for me.
COVID, yeah, how the wine mind, given our history of advocacy and being in community just outside of preserving the history. 2020 was a year, you know what I mean? And we were running on all cylinders. And while we as an organization lost money from being able to rent out or bring people into our space and having those type of programming that needed to be in person, we adjusted to the online demand. I actually got a fairly hip team. That's what I like to call them, the hip team, because they into all the digital stuff, the different ways to keep our presence up and things relevant, and really helping us to transition into that digital space that we definitely was not used to. We did a lot of advocacy work, supported the community and having space to talk about the issues, really fighting for the referendum that is now here in Asheville and Buncombe County, and like just being that agency. And so while it was bad given the health stuff that was impacting our community, the worst disparities was the Black community. And so that was a time for us as an organization to be real intentional about how we responded in that moment as not just the organization of history, but also being present for our community. And that's what we had to transition into doing, but it also helped us to grow as an organization by building our network and our connection to the Black community in Western North Carolina. And so it was a rough time. The transition the last 2 years has been rough, but it's been also rewarding.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Thank you all for that. And it seems like we're all on kind of a similar scale about how things have been going. And I appreciate each of your honesty in your response. I think too, what makes it difficult, calling back to one of the comments that Sarah made, was, you know, we keep thinking that it's going to end and like, oh, it's over, but then it's just take a deep breath and we keep going. We keep facing challenges. We keep finding new ways to, engage with audiences and do our programming and all sorts of things. So it's really been also interesting to see, as folks have pivoted and done more things online and different kinds of things, like there has been some great innovation going on. Particularly in our state and our community. So that's been something really, really interesting to see for sure. Now, Joanna, I'm gonna redirect back to you specifically, particularly as you are in leadership and have been leading an institution throughout this time. What has it been like to be at the helm of your institution during this pandemic?
Learning experience. Well, best sum it up. Like prior to COVID, I came in my position in 2018, August 2018. So I had a daughter in 2019, so I had to take some time off from the organization. It was like as soon as I was getting back to work, COVID hit. It was like it's been an adjustment. You know what I mean? I always feel like I'm a work in progress. And so for me, it was an opportunity to learn some new things, look at some different ways of viewing things, engaging with our college students and our high school students on a different level, even the middle school students on a different level, being able to see like, oh, like we had a middle school actually showed me how to set up Snapchat and stuff. Like we was like, you know what I'm saying, and what points is and why you gotta, you know what I'm saying? So like I've been learning, like the last 2 years has been a real learning opportunity, how to make those adjustments, and how to keep your organization surviving, well, thriving, not just surviving in the midst of a pandemic. And then COVID was over, now we're talking about the monkeypox. So, you know what I mean? Like, there's all these adjustments, but I feel better equipped to handle it should it come around again, because I've learned so much.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Yeah. Now, Bernard, you've been pretty busy over the last couple of years as well. Under your leadership, the city of New Bern was able to achieve a major local history project in the last year. Can you talk to us a little bit about some of the challenges as well as successes that you've seen in taking on this historical marker project? And what are your hopes for the future of this work?
Yeah, we embarked on a project to create a historic African-American walking trail in Newberry. It was in a specific neighborhood where the where HUD had given permission to remove some of the public housing. And they gave us $35,000 to erect 10 or more signs commemorating the history of the area. It was extremely challenging because a lot of that history had never been recorded. And so we had to really go in search of, we had a contractor, a researcher, and a project that I was talking to that was going to last about 18 months, ended up lasting 5.5 years.
Oh,
So
wow.
that was a long, long pregnancy before it was birthed. And it was birthed last summer on my birthday, on Juneteenth. And we had a great time, a great showing. It was very successful. Very difficult keeping folk together over that period of time. The challenge that we face now is that this was a project that was really initiated through the Historical Society. And after the project was completed, they felt that they did not have the resources and the personnel to continue with it, tours, etc. And I've gone on a couple of tours. I've taken people on the tours. The city itself has kind of embraced the project, and then we've done a 1-2 backstep thing. And so right now the project is kind of out there as an orphan, you know, and I'm working, that's why I came in your workshop on Friday to get some ideas on how we can make this project more accessible to the public and sell it to the Chamber of Commerce and other tourists, the Board of Tourism and other groups that are involved in economic development. You know, it's a matter of convincing them, and they should know that this is a great tool for economic development, cultural tourism. So that's where we are at this point. We've been promised some additional monies from private sources. And so if we continue on, the group itself that I worked with for 5 years, they were exhausted at the end of 5 years. And so we're looking to regenerate, pull together another group, and go on a second phase of signage, which in the end, our end goal is to create a comprehensive African-American sign trail around Newberry. My theory, well, my motto actually is New Bern's African-American history, North Carolina's best kept secret. So, hey, y'all, come on down and experience some of this great African-American history we have here, which is a litany of firsts in the state of North Carolina. First bank, first schools, etc. Last congressman from the South for 72 years, George H. White. Here in Newberry, we organized the first North Carolina Colored Volunteers, which was one of the first groups of African Americans, the first organization of African Americans to fight in the Civil War that was composed just about entirely of freed slaves. So there are quite a few others. The first Masonic Lodge in the state, and it continues on. The first AME Zion Church in the South, St. Peter's, which from here, North Carolina has the largest number of AME Zion churches in the country, in the state. And it was due to one of our earlier missionaries who came here with the Union troops, Reverend Hood, James Hood. And he, in the end, was instrumental in helping to organize this state's African-American political power, and helped to really usher in our new Constitution, which at that time was sarcastically called Hood's Constitution. But that Constitution was the strongest Constitution that this state had, which emphasized free public education for the first time in this state's history. So we're really proud of our city, African-American citizens who have made such an impact in this state and in this country. That's the long answer.
No, that's great to share. And I think it also, it brings to an important point, as so many communities have been taking on projects and things like that, of like, and you get the funding and you think, oh, this is a project, it's going to take us a year, it's going to take us 2 years, we're going to get it done and walk away from it. It's great. But things take time. And if you do them intentionally, if you're well researched, if you're engaging the community in this work, it's, it can be a real challenge for sure.
It definitely can be.
Absolutely. Now to turn our attention to Sara here. Sara, you've been doing quite a lot with digital tools, digital programming, and connecting the High Point Museum to broader, more diverse audiences. Can you tell us a little bit about your work and how has that been going so far?
Sure. With COVID, I didn't realize that was actually a need, because we're all in person. So there was no need to really put things online as much. Even doing presentations, it was more of a, you come to the presentation and if you miss it, then you just miss it. But when COVID really started to ramp up, knowing that our museum was on the verge of shutting down due to budgets and the city, and that we needed to really ramp up visitation in some way, we switched to digital, of course. And I had a crash course in learning how to do video editing and recording, and everything was purchased in order to do all of that. And that really was all of my focus, and just thinking, okay, we have these programs that we usually do in person. How can I pivot that into a digital experience? And I'll admit, a lot of everything that I learned from going to various webinars that suddenly popped up because everyone's trying to figure out the same thing. How do we do our programming virtually? How do we switch to a digital format? And I was really the only person doing it because I'm the only curator of education. So I focused a lot on, what do people actually know about High Point Museum other than we're the local history museum? And how can we get people in our space without physically going to our space? So I started doing a lot of work with our registrar and doing these fascinating artifacts videos where people are able to go behind the scene and kind of look at what the collections actually is, and seeing all these weird and fascinating artifacts that we actually have, and associating that with, what theme the month is, or the season or something. And so that really got people very interested. And then we have typical programs that we have in person that story time, ghost stories. Well, let's just do it virtually. With our more cultural programs like our community partnerships, we still want to do these programs, but we have to think, of course, in COVID age, how to do that. And so we have a really great community partner with our YWCA, the Latino Family Center, and we have every year a Dia de los Muertos program. And so that year we switched to, let's create a website that we can use, not just for this program, but schools can use that any time of the year to learn about this. And now that we're, school is back in session, kids are actually back in school, we can use this as a way for them to learn while they're in school, but they can also come to the High Point Museum and actually get a specific tour about Day of the Dead, because we have an ofrenda that we have the Latino Family Center put together, and we have that on display for a week. And so we can cater to schools to come and learn about Day of the Dead, why it's important, how it's celebrated. And we have been able to kind of promote that and expand it out to not just experience Day of the Dead in person, but go to the website, learn about it, watch these videos that we've put together with community members, come to our museum now and actually learn about it. And so all of the programs have been adapted in some sort of way, and to the point where we now have an app that you can download in the App Store, the Android store, that you can actually have a walking, driving tour of High Point Museum and our historic buildings, but also the historic buildings that are in downtown High Point that are related to the furniture industry. We are also trying to, do different locations, our local city park and, cemetery. So, and we have our African American Heritage Trail that we are also working with a local historian. And so we are trying to now juggle being in person, but also recognizing that we didn't really try to reach out to people who couldn't come to the museum. That's a group of people that we are completely missing. And so doing hybrid, having certain programs in person, but also having, presentations recorded and offered on our social media or our website, or having, a specific website that people can actually go to and interact with things, even having the app. You don't physically have to be in those locations in order to experience it. And it's great that we are, kind of acknowledging lower income families who don't have the means to come to us, or those Title I schools who can't get buses and come to us. They can still experience High Point Museum and High Point and the greater High Point area through digital means. So it's been really gratifying to see, but in the beginning, I'll admit it was a little challenging.
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, it sounds like you've taken on a wealth of different projects with that. And I didn't know about the app, so I'll have to take a look at that. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, thinking about not just the physical visitors to the museum, but the other ways that folks might be visiting, I think so interesting. And thinking about how materials might be used in schools. I know that that's something, my husband is an educator, and he's really found all of these wonderful things that are creating. It's like, oh, where can I plug that into a lesson and get the kids to experience something that's not in this classroom they don't have time for, or the ability to bus to. I think that's so important. Absolutely.
Especially since, I've been in this job going on 4 years. I started January 2019, and I can't tell you how many times I actually went in schools to do something or to teach something and to interact with kids. And, that was my year to learn High Point Museum, to learn our community partners. And 2020 was going to be the year where, the programs were just going to explode. And then, COVID happened. So it's really having to readjust. How do I interact with school groups as a whole? Having hybrid programs where they, beam me in and I do
Yeah.
something like this where they have activities sent to them from us so that they can do things. But by the time, time has a way of messing with you. So by the time, you have a way to do all of this, well, something has already changed. So it's either obsolete or you need to take into measure something else. And so we're kind of back to basic where we are providing, school tours again. However, if you want me to go into your school, I'm totally fine with that. As long as you're okay with certain measures that I take in order to keep me safe and keep you safe. So that is also, it's unfortunate that things have gotten a little politicized, but I like to just say blanket, I'm trying to keep you safe. I'm trying to keep me safe. And I have OCD, so it just works for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's important to highlighting that you're keeping yourself safe as well as them. And yeah, it's been complex in our state, kind of navigating the different feelings and thoughts that folks have had over this time. But I appreciate you prioritizing yourself and think that that's something that we as museum and cultural workers that, if we are not safe and healthy, then we can't be doing the work that we're doing. So making sure that that comes first. Wonderful. Well, I'd like to open my next question up to everyone. Feel free to whoever feels called to answer first. But talk to me a little bit about, for each of you in your work, you strive towards connecting with your communities in meaningful ways. How have your relationships in your communities shifted or grown within the last year or so? And how do you go beyond just traditional museum and public history work to serve the communities in which you work?
Well, I'll try to tackle that first. It has grown. Things have changed, as we've heard constantly today. And I think we're all exploring digital ways to reach the public. We varied our approach, and we focused on going to schools, knowing that museum attendance has dropped drastically, to say the least, and people are not coming out as much. As a Civil War reenactor, we give public history through the events that attract people, and they're usually outside. So that has been a boom for us. And there's also a shortage of venues now that people are, organizations are less likely to engage in, which creates actually a market for us and other folks. So what I'm doing, this is a learning experience. As I mentioned before, I didn't finish the statement about the workshop Friday that you gave. I was looking to improve our digital presence. Basically, the QR codes I was interested in, and how you are setting up the green book sites across the state. Part of our exercise is to look at how we could tie those locations together and really create a tourism trail that benefits everyone. So that's where we are now, and this has been a challenging time. It has challenged our creativity, our ability to think outside the box, because if we don't, then we're going to be lost. There's nothing remains the same, and we have to be up to the challenge.
Absolutely. I'm curious too, and I'm not sure if this is work that you did prior to the pandemic, but I've also heard that you and the colored troops have done some community work. I know you've worked some with, I believe, the Boys and Girls Club, and there's also a senior home too. Talk to me a little bit about that work that you've done.
Several of our members have been really focused on community projects where we get out and make ourselves visible to the community. Plus, we have an issue with reenactment and with history anyway, because it's so important to bring that enthusiasm, to bring that awareness of who we are to the younger generation. So as we go out into the community, we're focusing more and more on younger folk. We did go out to the nursing homes, and I actually opposed it to a degree, because I said we need, and, nobody in the nursing home is going to join the U.S. Colored troops and travel with us. We need to be in the schools. We need to be where young people are. And here in Newberry, we have a very unique situation wherein the last hurricane we had, Florence, destroyed our community center, our gym, which was actually the soul of our community. Everybody came there of various ages. I was a coach there for about 20 or 25 years, so I missed that contact with the youth, and the building itself has been torn down now. And the city's in process of building another one slightly outside the community, so that, there's a big, I say there's a big hole, like a hole in a donut in the soul of our community. And I feel that if we're not active, and history, basically, history creates our present, and history also defines our future. And if we are disconnected from that, our past and our present, then how do we know where we're going? And I just, as I do have these gray beards, right? So I've seen a bit, probably more so than you folk have. I was born and raised in Jim Crow, and I've seen the world change, but I've also seen it not change, unfortunately. And we have some of the same issues that were present 50, 70, 100 years ago. And I also see a repetition of it. And that's why I take what I know and what I've learned and the stage that I'm on, to kind of share that with folk, because we are not aware of it. We're not aware of the politics that were prevalent in the 1890s here in North Carolina, the backlash it created, and the disenfranchisement of African Americans and the taking away of the vote. And we see it happening today. It alarms me, and some folk are not alarmed. So I kind of look at myself as a Paul Revere. The folks are coming. You better be prepared. Thank you for that question.
Yeah, absolutely. Rana, it looked like you had a few thoughts while he was talking.
Like, I'm definitely behind a lot of what he said. I definitely can't understand exactly where he's coming from. But for us, the why from financial management, like, we look at all the issues. Like, it's not just one issue, and it takes more than just one agency. You know what I mean? To really influence the change. And I'll tell people all the time, like, recognize your greatness. And they be like, why you always saying that to me? Because if you don't recognize it, then, and we recognize it's not benefiting you, because we can see it in you. You got to see it in yourself. You know what I mean? I say it to myself every morning. And so in this work, from the financial management, some of the simplest things that I've created a program called Successful Transitions that we implemented here at the YMI. And it was based on my struggle with getting employed and then it becoming unaffordable to work when you're getting benefits, you know what I mean? And not being able to manage a budget. Like, I didn't learn a budget till I was 30 years old with kids. You know what I mean? It didn't, like, that just wasn't something that my parents talked about around the dinner table, because a lot of times our finances weren't what they needed to be to really meet the needs of our household. But it also kept me from understanding money management. You know what I mean? And so we've been introducing we're in community. We've always been in community, doing things in community, and also within our building and bringing community to us. But we are more geared to being in community and identifying the needs. Like that was one of the first things I did when I came into my position. Like my first month, I started surveying door to door. You know what I mean? 5,000 people. I went every day and I hit all the Black communities and not just the Black communities, some of the more affluent, some of the lesser affluent. You know what I mean? I hit everywhere just because I wanted to really see the diversity and the perspective of what we should be doing as a community agency. And like while we preserve historic artifacts and we have performances and do all of these things internally, our impact on communities is impact over everything. You know what I mean? Like we could touch 10,000 people, but if we didn't have a positive impact on that 10,000 people, the touch was pointless. You know what I mean? And so we always like, we really don't look at the number. We think of the quality of the interaction with our community. You know what I mean? When we left, did they feel good? Was they happy that we was there? Did they benefit anything from what we are doing? Because like, as the executive director of this organization, like my personal mission is to positively impact 1 million lives plus. You know what I mean? And that's a personal commitment. So I bring that to work every day. And my staff, they all have the same hunger. And so while they're developing and implementing programs and events, getting partnerships to be able to have phlebotomy classes free for our people in our community to be able to access that, and all these certifications and certificate programs from economic development to down payment assistance. That was one thing that was really highlighted as well. Prior, it really had stood out historically, but it was kind of masked by the other bigger issues that were impacting the Black community. But like in my other hat, I'm the community relations officer for Self-Help Credit Union. And so I create programs. I created a Black economic solvency program that Self-Help adopted. And so we now do down payment assistance program. Like I want to be intentional because like the issues are specific and where the negative impacts are hitting. The disparities and the inequities are real and specific. And so we don't start speaking that more specific language and how we do and develop our programming, we're becoming part of the problem. And so like from the school systems and our youth programs, like we've been running because the needs are even more prevalent now than before COVID, you know what I mean? And the need to start really getting some work done around minimizing some of these inequities racially, very intentionally racially. We're gonna keep having the same conversation in 10 years from now. I don't want my kids to be like going through the same thing that I was dealing with now. You know what I mean? I want to be done shifted the narrative, tip the scales a little bit by the time my kids are my age. You know what I mean? And so I'm just like, our organization, we just out to change the narrative. Like a lot of times Black people don't write the narrative about them, about what's really going on. Somebody else is writing that narrative. And we're here to support community and rewriting the narrative. Like, y'all get every shooting that happened over here, but they just had this big book bag giveaway. They just had this going on. You know what I mean? But y'all didn't come out for that. You know what I mean? And so being the organization that we are in the historical standing we have in Asheville and Buncombe County, I've been able to dabble in the politics because that's really where the change is going to come from.
That's
you know what I mean? I completely agree with Mr. Bernard. That's where the change starts. And so we're able to be on that level where they're bringing us issues and different things we're discussing in community and advocate, you know what I mean? And sit at the tables. And one community member told me, she's like, one of the things that stuck to me about everything that you said in the rallies and all the different speeches I don't watch you give, she was like, you always say, if you're not at the table, you on the menu. I said, because that's like, that's the reality of where we at. You know what I mean? So I make a point to be at the table, no matter how difficult the conversation is, no matter, you know what I mean, what it looks like currently. We got to have a seat at the table. You know what I mean? And I try to be that seat at the table for my community, and also giving them the opportunity to step into those seats once those doors are open, so that we're also creating leaders. I have kids mentoring me now, trying to just understand what I do. You know what I mean? And the many hats I wear, but it's so important to be in community.
It all boils down to like representation, right?
Yeah, it is.
Like, I'm the only person of color on staff. And so, yeah. So it is important for me whenever we do a program that's out in the community that I'm there. That because when I was younger, I never saw myself. And so I hated history. I didn't see myself represented truly, other than, enslavement. But, African Americans are much more than that. And so once I got into history and realized that, I'm always one of the firsts, or I'm usually the only. And that wasn't something that I wasn't used to, because I found that in the classroom as well, and had experiences with teachers who are like, this is so unrealistic for African Americans to be, even if we're in pretend, to be the mayor or to be, those people in those high positions. And so it's important for me to be at every single program so people can see that I'm working hard, perspiration just drenched down my face because I'm working hard for your experience, for you to see that I have a smile on my face, that I'm enjoying what I'm doing. And when I'm on a school tour, that I'm excited and happy to share all of the information I have about this place to you and your kids, and to advocate for the museum and for any program that we're doing to show that we see you, there is forward momentum. And I really feel strongly about museums and cultural organizations. We reflect the community just as much as they reflect us. So we need to not just involve them in programming, ask them, what would you like to see? How would you like to be represented? But also, like, walk around your organizations, your museums, with a pad of paper and a pencil and just write down what you don't see. And then think about what kind of programs or who you can reach out to in the community to get those kind of representation in the organization, within the museum. And like, that's how I go forward in any sort of programming. Like, who is this actually for? I don't want to assume things, but if I notice that there's something lacking, then I'll think, well, we don't have a lot of Latinx representation within our museum panels. How can we change that? How can we update these panels? And we already have a good relationship with the Latino Family Center. What are we missing? Okay, we need more cultural representation. So why don't we have outdoor panels about all the holidays around the world? And we celebrate Christmas, but there's Diwali, and there's this and that, and like, let's actually reflect our community a little bit, and let's not be so self-focused, but reach out to other. It's going to be uncomfortable because you might offend people, you might not know where to go, but at least people see you doing something, and that trust eventually will happen. Because I know, especially with the Black community, we will sit on things until we see someone persistently and actively say, we're here, I'm not going anywhere, I'm going to stay connected with you no matter what. And then that trust will build, that relationship will build. And then, we unclench a little bit. And then, we can do such beautiful work together if people are just remain persistent. But also, that representation is so important.
Absolutely. I really appreciate your comment about persistence. There was a conversation I had last week with folks, and it was brought up of, oh, you want to do a program, oh, you want to do an exhibit about, the Black community, Latinx community, whoever. You can't just reach out to them at the time that, like, oh, just for this program, this is the one thing I want to do with you, and walk away. No, this is a long-term relationship, or else there's not going to be that trust there, or else when you go knock on people's doors, they're going to be like, oh yeah, you were those one and done folks. Like we don't,
Yeah. Oh,
we don't need to
about
have
that time of year where you're wanting something from me.
Yeah. Oh,
It has to be mutually beneficial. Like, okay, we do this with you, but what can you do for us? Vice versa. Like, let's not just do this once a year. What can we do for your organization that will be helpful for you?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think you each kind of touched on one of my last questions here, but I'll build off of it a little bit. You really highlighted kind of the importance of being a Black cultural worker of North Carolina, that it's important for people to see people who look like us in positions across the state and across our communities. But knowing that you are this representation, this space for your institutions, what do you think it's important for people to know about your work specifically, and or like your leadership philosophy? What do you think it's important for people to know from you?
Well, I was raised by a manager, and so I was raised to know the different levels of relationship building and how to encourage and recognize potential in people. But I also was raised to understand and have self-awareness of things that I need to work on to be a true leader, things that I need to do better, and how I can be the best version of myself. So I am always working to better myself and always working to not just do that in my personal life, but make myself a better leader, how to connect with my employees a little bit better. And I also take that into how I do programming. How can, I always do evaluations after program. Okay, how did we do? What can we do better for next year? What can we add to make it an even better experience for people? And it's not surprising to my family members that I'm so anal about my own performance. When I was little, I would give myself a persona called Business Sarah, and 8-year-old writing a business letter to the tooth fairy because she didn't do something, and so I'm evaluating her work. Just being aware of that when I was younger, that what you say you'll do, and if you don't perform to that degree, and then people are going to have a different way of looking at you because you aren't a person of your word. And that's really important, especially as practitioners and people of color. We have to step up to the table, and we have to work 3 times as hard as everybody else to get the same kind of response. But it is gratifying because more people can recognize your work, more people can recognize your work ethic and integrity. It's really important to have integrity in this job, and to know that people can count on you whenever you do something. So like when the commission asks me to do something, I do it because they know I'm there, but I also now know how you work and your integrity. If historic sites ask me, they already know because I worked for them before. And so it's all about making those connections and networking, but also being a person of your word and putting all of that energy into bettering yourself. So that's what people can expect from me always, and from any program that I am a part of.
Joanna, George, Bernard, George, what are you thinking?
Well, I guess we are all on the same trail. We're on the same path. I mean, respect from the community is so important. You got to give it respect, the community respect, individuals respect, and you build on it. People have to know that they can depend upon you, and that your word, as you stated, Ms. Blanchett, is is truth. And you mentioned Ms. Little about politics. That's all part of it too. I mean, I I know in some of your jobs, you can't openly patronize a political figure or political party. As a former city employee, city planning planner, I had to be careful of that. But I'm retired now, and there's a free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, I'm free at last, and I can say things that I was reluctant to say before. I can do things, and I can speak truth to power because I no longer work for anybody. I work for myself. And that's a great freedom in that. There's a great freedom in that. And it's a freedom that comes when you know that you can speak for those who are voiceless. You can speak for those who are powerless. And sometimes you can speak, I almost said unkindly. But we use certain words and certain buzzwords that will keep our jobs, that will pave the way for future opportunities to make an even greater impact. And that's what we have to consider in our day-to-day dealing with folk. But we also have to look at the long range effect. And as you said, Ms. Blanchett, that people are looking at us. We are the leaders in the community. We are the examples. And fortunately or unfortunately, they look very critically at us, very critically at us. So we are on a pedestal and we've got a microscopic mirror examining all of our actions. And I love it. I love it to a degree because I have no shame in my game. What you see is what you get. And as I said, that's a freedom that has been worth working for in my previous positions. So that when I meet someone who previously gave me a rough time, I was a zoning administrator at one time and a planner. And when I first changed positions, I was in housing, public housing and assisted housing. And when I left there to work for the city, my former boss says, why would you want to work in that area? And I didn't fully know what I was getting into, but I also knew that it was an area of, controversy. We find ourselves in it. And we have to hone our skills in order to deal with controversy, deal with it successfully, and be able to go home and sleep soundly. So that's where I am. One of my greatest, I think, achievements, I took 33 people, local people, to Africa to celebrate the city's 300th anniversary. And I was really proud of that. 10 of them were school kids. And when I told, we had one white sophomore, a junior, and I was talking to the kids on the bus. And I told them that first man was in Africa, the oldest human remains in Africa. She didn't believe me. And that's what I love most of all about what I do, because I have an opportunity to meet people where they are and to talk with them, to explain, and possibly to lift them up to a higher level of thinking and consideration about our humanity and about what we actually have in common, which greatly outweighs what we fear in each other. That's my long answer again.
No, I appreciate it. Very, very thorough, not too long.
I think I'm at this place where people who know me know, like, I'm accountable. You know what I mean? Good, bad, or ugly. You know what I mean? I'm accountable, you know what I mean, for any mistakes. I have like being in this position has humbled me because I like for the work that I was doing prior to coming into this position, I was actually pretty much like you, Sarah, I'm like the only Black person for this area, and it was crazy because it was like I needed time, like space to breathe, because it was overwhelming, feeling like I couldn't truly be myself. And so I actually took this job while I was still working, you know what I mean, my other job, and it got so bad so I couldn't like focus when I would go in the office to work, because I would be here truly advocating for the things that I'm passionate about and for, you know what I mean, Black people, and not having a muzzle or wear a mask and be truly authentically myself.
Yeah.
And then I would go in there and it'd be like, okay, put the mask back on. Okay, you can't say this, you can't say that. It was so restricting that this position was actually a breath of fresh air. I was able, like, I was like, yeah, this is what I love to do it. You know what I mean? Like, I love to come into work every day. That's like the
good.
craziest thing my whole life for having jobs. I have never felt that before, where it was like, I didn't dread coming into the office. And so, like, I'm just a genuine person. If it's wrong, it's wrong. If it's right, it's right. My son say I'm either 0 or I'm 1,000. You know what I mean? There's no in between. And like I don't see that gray area, because like in this work, given the work that we're trying to do and preserving the history, which is really so important as we use all of these buzz terms, equity, diversity, inclusion, all of these buzzwords, you know what I mean? If we're not really reconciling with our truth historically, like, let's not mask that. Let's not shy away from that history because it's uncomfortable. And it's crazy because I was in a presentation and one of my white friends, and we were really, really close, was like, I'm so uncomfortable in these meetings, and then I have to watch this and it's painful. I said, how you think I be feeling? You know what I'm saying? Like, did you think that I wasn't reacting because I could sit in here, but like I want to know the history, you know what I mean? Because it wasn't taught like it should have been, the way it should have been taught. And I had Black teachers throughout the years, but they got so much pushback. They're trying to introduce it into the schools to where, like, I'm a 4th generation native of Asheville. So my great-great-grandparents was at the wine mine. My great-grandparents, like, in programs and events, and like even my parents. And you know what I mean? And so it came full circle. I was taking equity classes at the wine mine. And I was like, not equity, but we was taking these etiquette classes at the wine mine. And I was like, Dad, why are you making me do this? And I used to like try to sneak out and stuff to get out the class. But it came in beneficial. It came to be beneficial as an adult. I didn't see the purpose or why I was doing it, what it would be needed for then. But then when I got in these different environments, I was able to shift and be able to, and felt comfortable in the environment because I knew what the salad fork was. I knew how to use my tools. I knew how to sit and dress. It was
You were being taught skills for survival.
Exactly, but I didn't realize it at the time. And so now I'm in this position where I'm working with youth, and everybody tell you here, I'm one of the biggest youth advocates that you'll find around here. I think it matters. Education is key. You know what I mean? And it's not, oh, they have more privilege. And then I think like a lot of times we as Black people don't recognize the level of privilege just that we have gained through the work that we are doing. And so that privilege opens doors for us to sit at tables that other people wouldn't ordinarily be invited to. You know what I mean? And like my son, he's like, his friends like, you have privilege because of who your mother is.
That's right.
like the reality is you have privilege. And he was like, I'm Black, I have no privileges. And, and he was like, well, have you met my mom? And so, but he did, you know what I mean? He didn't have to deal with a lot of the things because the school knew I was coming. I'm telling you, I was like, I'll be there. I'm there. I'm like, they know I'm very present for my kids. They know I was coming. And then they had already dealt with me with so many other kids before my kid got there that they already knew what the conversation was going to be and how we needed to approach a solution. And his principal said, I hate that he's leaving when he transitioned to high school. She was like, because you helped us to address problems and conversations that was being had, like at PTO. It's not representative. We need more Black parents. I said, do you understand how many jobs I'm working? And you really want me to take time to come volunteer to bake a cookie? And it's not that I was sending cookies with my kids, but I couldn't be there, taken away from opportunities I can be working on feeding my kids and making sure they got the basic necessities, not the extra stuff. You know what I mean? And so, like, I am what people need me to be within my extension of my privilege and the opportunities that have been given to me. Like I want to open doors. And so any problem that come to me, I look at how can we keep this from being a problem for the next person? You know what I mean? Like, oh, we having it right now, but what we gonna do to fix it so it don't happen with the next person? And like even the reparations conversation, like that's complicated. And we're like, for Asheville and Buncombe County to really be doing reparations to Black people, it's a conversation. People are uncomfortable. If it's some conversations, I'll be uncomfortable and I'll be emotional. It's emotional work. Like people can say you can take yourself out of it. And I'm real with my interns and stuff. We honest. I don't want to shade because I don't want to give you a false sense of what something is, and then you make a decision and it's not informed by the reality of what the situation is. In this job, you got to be able to do your self-care because it is emotionally taxing. You know what I mean? You care about every person that you're dealing with. You know what I mean? You care about what it looks like for community when they hurting and they struggling, you hurting and you struggling with them. You know what I mean? It is the most rewarding work, but it is definitely work. Like it's not easy. It's not no door that you open is gonna be easy. And so I used to hate the term activist. It's like I'm not an activist. That's how people used to introduce me at engagements. The activist and community leader. I'm like, what? I'm not an activist. I thought it was like a negative thing, but I am an agent of change. And everything that I think all of us are, you know what I mean? And all of the works that we're doing, we're agents of change. And like, if people don't know anything about us, that's something that they can count on as being true, is that we're agents of change, changing the environment for which other people will walk up behind us. You know what I mean? And laying those stepping stones that our forefathers laid for us.
That's
And
right.
you know what I mean? So we change agents. I love it. You know what I'm saying? I love the work. And I love to meet new people who are doing some good stuff. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for that, Duana. And I think that, you know, what a poignant note to wrap up our conversation today. You know, working as agents of change. I see a couple of folks in the chat here. Thank you, Sarah, Duana, and Bernard for joining us for this conversation this afternoon, our final in our webinar series this year. And thank you for sharing your expertise and your experiences. You know, it's challenging work, it's big work, but we are agents of change, as Duana just stated. So I appreciate each and every one of you and appreciate that we had the time together to sit down this afternoon.